Raid on terror. 2 die and 7 are arrested in a raid on a suburban Paris apartment. Open doors. Pope Francis wants no church doors locked, even as the Vatican tightens security. Capitol screening. A shocking documentary about Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell is shown on Capitol Hill. And the beauty of faith. Saturday's Feast of the Presentation of Mary is depicted in 2 unique pieces of art. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, November 18th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. A Paris prosecutor says the suspected ringleader of Friday's attack was not arrested in today's massive police raid. It is still possible he may be among those killed in the raid north of Paris. In France, where President François Hollande says his country is forced into battle with ISIS.
That we are at war.
Wednesday was a day to go on the offensive. Belgian and French police, along with security agencies, picked up on a telephone wiretap, leading them to an apartment in Saint-Denis. That's a northern Paris suburb not far from where the deadly stadium attack happened Friday. The wiretap suggested a relative of Abdelhamid Abouad, the suspected Belgian ISIS ringleader of Friday's attacks, could be in the apartment. Outside the building, a clear buildup. Heavily armed officers come in by the truckload for an hours-long operation. A woman in another apartment hid with her baby.
They said to stay laid down on the floor, don't move, and turn off all lights, and that's what I did, and I hid.
She says gunfire and explosions shook the building until officials announced the raid was over.
A police operation that was particularly dangerous and heavy has just ended. 2 people died, including a woman by explosives.
Officials say they will use DNA analysis to determine who was killed. A Belgian state broadcaster reports a woman who blew herself up in the operation is a cousin of Abouad, but that's not confirmed. President Hollande says he will ask to extend France's state of emergency for 3 more months. That would give authorities more powers in conducting searches and detentions. And 2 planes bound for Paris from the U.S. are diverted Tuesday night. Officials say bomb threats were received both against French jets. Air France Flight 65 was headed from Los Angeles to Paris. It diverted to Salt Lake City. Airport Police Chief Craig Vargo.
And once we got the plane parked, we had a number of shuttle buses that responded out there and very quickly helped the passengers get off the plane. We shuttled them over to a safe area inside the terminals in the customs area where they were kept safe and comfort. And then from there, we put our canines onto the aircraft as quickly as possible to go through the passenger compartment.
Shortly after the all-clear was given for that flight, Air France Flight 55 from Washington, D.C.'s Dulles Airport to Paris diverted to Nova Scotia. Law enforcement there also later signaled there was no danger. At this point, we do not know who made those threats. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Nigeria's Boko Haram kills dozens of people in suicide bombings. At least 34 people were killed and another 80 wounded in the town of Yola. 2 more suicide bombers killed at least 15 people and injured 53 in the city of Kano. Boko Haram terrorists have killed 20,000 and forced 2.3 million people to flee their homes. Pope Francis reflects on the upcoming extraordinary Jubilee Year of Mercy at today's general audience.
Niente porte blindate nella Chiesa, niente, tutto aperto.
The Pope saying no doors should be locked, all open, he says passionately. If the door of God's mercy is always open, even so must be the doors of our churches, our parishes, our institutions, our dioceses. For only when we keep doors open, Francis says, can we go out to bring this mercy of God to those who need it most. Alan Holdren joining us from Rome tonight. And Alan, is there any increased security at the Vatican since Friday's attacks in Paris?
Yes, actually, Brian, after those Friday attacks in Paris and ahead of the Jubilee that's going to start on December the 8th, really is a visible increase in security here in Rome this week. Today, during the general audience, there were more than double the security personnel to guard the Pope and pilgrims while they met with the Pope. And you can see here behind me, there are a lot of police vehicles. There are actually 7 that I counted just a second ago in comparison to the usual 3 that there would be at this time of night on a normal day.
And Alan, millions of pilgrims are expected in Rome during the Year of Mercy. What plans are in place to keep everyone safe?
Well, the city of Rome has said that they are going to actually block the airspace above Rome for the Year of Mercy. They want to make sure that the Pope and pilgrims and everyone is protected in the best way possible. Franco Gabrielli, the prefect of Rome, actually announced today that security personnel has the approval to shoot out of the sky any ultralight vehicles or drones that go against that airspace ban. So they're really serious here in Rome about this. The authorities here in Rome also said today that they have increased the soldier presence on the streets of Rome by 700. Brian?
Thank you. Alan Holdren in Rome tonight.
You're welcome, Brian.
And Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal bows out of the 2016 Republican race for president.
I'm honored to have had the chance to run for president of the United States. My parents came here 45 years ago in search of freedom and opportunity. Never in a million years would they have imagined that I could be governor, much less run for president. This wasn't our time.
The 44-year-old Catholic convert says he is not ready to endorse another candidate yet. He says he will support the eventual Republican presidential nominee. And some Republicans are pushing back against aggressive opposition in their party to Syrian refugees being resettled in the U.S. A number of GOP presidential candidates, governors, and senators are calling to delay or stop accepting Syrian refugees. They point to indications that one of the perpetrators in Friday's Paris attacks may have entered France with a Syrian passport. Those objecting say moderate voters could view Republican opposition as extreme and intolerant. Conservatives see a need to be mindful of fears of an attack on U.S. soil. U.S. bishops say they're concerned for the refugees who are caught in the middle. In a statement, Bishop Eusebio Elizondo, chairman of the Bishops' Committee on Migration, says these refugees are fleeing terror themselves, violence like we've witnessed in Paris. We cannot and should not blame them for the actions of a terrorist organization. The bishops also issue their Faithful Citizenship Election Year Guide. It stresses a moral imperative to evaluate candidates according to their positions on marriage and life issues. One of 7 groups challenging the federal government's contraceptive mandate makes its case in Washington today. Priests for Life vows to disobey the law if it comes down to that.
We're not going to give this coverage no matter what. If it means that we have to cancel health insurance for our employees, that's what we'll have to do, which I would hate to do. But we're not going to obey the mandate no matter what. So let's pray for wisdom for the justices, that they stand by what our country was founded on, which was religious freedom.
Priests for Life claims it's the largest ministry in the Catholic Church focused exclusively on ending abortion. The dark story of Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell comes to the U.S. Capitol. His unsanitary house of horrors and the deaths of women and babies are the topic of a new documentary. Jason Calvi reports from the Capitol tonight.
Brian, the film 3801 Lancaster, American Tragedy, was screened right here where abortion deeply divides. The 2 members of the House who sponsored the screening, as well as about 30 staffers, watched it. The documentary features interviews with Gosnell's patients, his family, and the man himself.
Gosnell offers to perform second trimester abortions on 15 poor women who have been bused to his clinic from Chicago.
Filmmaker David Altrogi interviewed Kermit Gosnell over the course of 8 months and worked on the film for almost 5 years.
The abortion issue, that was just abstract to me. It was just a political issue, and I think it made it a human issue. Meeting the women who had gone to Gosnell, seeing the photos of the babies who died at his clinic, and seeing sort of the faces of the abortion issues.
Ginny McKenzie came to watch the film in the Capitol. She had an abortion, but now is pro-life.
I know those little babies' souls are in glory. That's the only comforting part, but they could have had a mom. They could have brothers and sisters, and shame on him for hurting those women that she can't have children now.
Altrogi says the film tells both sides of the story. He hopes to spark a national dialogue.
We got to look at this case, and we got to say, why did it happen? And we got to ask, is it happening elsewhere? And those are questions. I mean, the lives of women and babies hang in the balance here.
He says the film is also a memorial.
I just want the women and the babies who died at Gosnell's clinic to be remembered. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons we made the film.
Despite efforts like this one, which make people aware of the horrors of late-term abortion, the Senate failed to pass the 20-week abortion ban. It says at that point, babies can feel pain. Now, if you'd like to see a screening of the film or sponsor one yourself, you can go to the website 3801lancaster.com. Brian?
Jason Calvi at the Capitol. Thank you, Jason. Representative Joe Pitt serving the people of Pennsylvania for his 10th term in Congress. And Congressman, you'll retire very soon. Why boldly bring this documentary to Capitol Hill?
Well, this is an important message that needs to get out there. Not only is this showing the dark side, the horrors of abortion, the abortion industry, but it shows the deniers. You know, this man, Dr. Gosnell, is still in denial and unrepentant, and that unfortunately is the mentality of many people in this. And our idea is to educate, let people know the facts, and help them understand the importance of educating people on what is happening in this country. And there's still lots of late-term abortionists and clinics all over this country that people don't even know about. So we have to educate people.
What kind of feedback do you get from your colleagues on Capitol Hill with this?
Well, they're really stunned when they see this, to see the rationalization that the gentleman uses in his defense of his position. Maybe some of it is a legal tactic, I don't know. But it's stunning to see anyone justify such a horrible practice. And it's just graphically demonstrated in this film, showing not only what they do in the practice every day. You know, he was making $10,000 to $15,000 a day in this gruesome business, but to show just in general the filth and what some of these clinics look like that operate, you know, in these corner offices.
On a lighter side, as you retire, can we expect to see more of your artwork?
Well, yes, I'm still, you know, it's a Sunday afternoon hobby. Painting is something I really enjoy. I'm doing one now showing the Capitol Dome with the all the scaffolding around it. That'll never be seen again. So I thought I'd do, you know, a painting of that. So that's what I'm working on right now.
In sharp contrast to the beautiful dome that you painted shortly after 9/11. Congressman Joe Pitt from Pennsylvania, thank you for taking time to be with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for educating the public and helping in the pro-life movement.
Coming up, President Obama chastises those who think the U.S. should favor Christian refugees. And a top executive of Catholic Relief Services discusses the refugee crisis with our Catherine Szeltner. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and President Obama takes aim at those wanting to stop the flow of Syrian refugees into the United States. Meeting with other world leaders in Manila this week, Obama rejects priority treatment for Christians.
Suggesting that Christians are more worthy of protection than Muslims are in a war-torn land, that feeds the ISIL narrative. It's counterproductive, and it needs to stop.
These meetings are focused on trade and climate issues, but talk of containing the spread of Islamic extremism did seep into that agenda. Kristina Olney is Director of Government Relations and Outreach for In Defense of Christians. What would you say to President Obama? What would you like the administration to do?
Thank you for having me on the show, Brian. There are a number of policy implications for the United States and Europe since the attacks in Paris. On the one hand, we face the question of how to ensure that terrorists, like the ones who committed the attacks in Paris, cannot enter into our countries. Europe faces a particularly difficult set of challenges in this regard. They are facing the worst migrant crisis since World War II. Germany alone will have processed over 800,000 refugees just this year. And in the United States, we must ensure that our government has all of the tools that it needs to ensure our security. We must vet and screen every refugee that enters into this country. But many refugee experts, Brian, are saying that our screening process for refugees is already extremely robust. It's a process that can take up to 2 years. However, if our process is not sufficiently robust, we must ensure that it is. But what we must not do, Brian, is sacrifice our moral obligation to vulnerable communities who are facing horrors that we cannot even possibly imagine at the expense of our security. Because the fact is, Brian, that there is an ongoing genocide taking place in the Middle East against Christians, Yazidis, and others, and we call on the Obama administration to publicly recognize that.
The administration apparently will do that for the Yazidis, and you're saying make sure the Christians are included?
That's right, Brian. We have been hearing that the Obama administration may make an announcement to that effect, and while In Defense of Christians would welcome the recognition that Yazidis are facing a genocide, we would be strongly disappointed if the Obama administration failed to recognize that Christians and other religious minorities are also facing a genocide. The fact is, Brian, there is a broad consensus. The world's largest association of genocide scholars, over 150 bipartisan members of Congress, and the world's leading international religious freedom experts agree that the crimes of humanity that Christians, Yazidis, and others have suffered meet even the strictest definition of genocide. And genocide, the designation of a genocide, which is a specific crime against humanity, has foreign policy implications for the United States. The United States has a moral obligation to offer protection, aid, and asylum for those who are facing a genocide. So In Defense of Christians calls on the president to recognize the genocide faced by Yazidis, Christians, and others in the region.
Kristina Olney, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Brian.
And when U.S. Catholic bishops return home after their fall meeting in Baltimore, supporting the family is one of their priorities. We discussed that earlier this week with the shepherd of a proactive archdiocese. Atlanta Archbishop Wilton Gregory is with us. And Your Excellency, following up on the Synod on the Family, how do you support families in your archdiocese?
Well, Brian, one of the things that we happen to be engaged in full-time now is the promotion of our archdiocesan pastoral plan, which resulted after a consultative survey that brought in 15,000 responses from our people. And one of the important concerns for families is the passing on of the faith. As a matter of fact, that was the top priority from the survey, that our parents are really concerned about how do we as the church assist them in passing on the faith. It's a real challenge in today's environment, and so the pastoral plan is calling for our parishes to provide more opportunities for family-based catechesis. That is the opportunity of parents and kids together exploring the meaning of the faith, the purpose of the faith, the teachings of the faith, and then the subsequent parts of that pastoral plan involve living our faith, that is, putting out the practical dimensions of what we believe into our everyday lives, and sharing our faith, the evangelical dimensions that parents and kids together, parishes, can engage in promoting both a true and an accurate expression of our Catholic faith.
I know this is a concern for parents all over the country. Do you think that the model there that you're putting together in Atlanta could apply to other dioceses and archdioceses?
Well, I hope so. Obviously, like all other dioceses, there are inconsistencies in the size of parishes and the composition of parishes. But hopefully what we're doing is inviting the parochial community to learn from each other. That is, what works well in one parish might work well in others, and a more collaborative effort to bring local communities together and to share resources and to share success stories. So I hope that other dioceses might borrow from us or even share with us things that are working effectively. So it's a networking effort at its grassroots efforts.
And certainly a way for the church to build up the family and vice versa. Your Excellency, Archbishop Wilton Gregory from Atlanta, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
And after Paris, how do we as Christians welcome refugees without sacrificing national security? Our Catherine Szeltner sits down with Sean Callahan, Chief Operating Officer of Catholic Relief Services, for his perspective.
Sean, more than 24 governors are saying they are closing the doors to Syrian refugees. What's your take on that?
You know, we can understand the reaction and people being frightened by this refugee crisis and by the terrorists coming into Europe and all. But really, from our perspective, there's very, very little chance that these refugees are going to be terrorists. They spend 18 to 24 months being reviewed and screened. They've traveled through several other countries prior to coming to the United States, and they've been screened into those countries. And many of them have spent 3 to 4 years in refugee camps as well in the region, either in Lebanon, Turkey, or Jordan. And so they have really been screened, and there's much easier ways if terrorists wanted to get into the country that they could.
But in light of the Paris terror attack, how do you balance between welcoming refugees with open arms, but being smart and being safe? Does there need to be more of a vetting process?
Sure. Well, I think the vetting process won't get any easier for anyone, so I'm sure that Homeland Security will continue that ongoing vetting process. As well, I think as the Holy Father had said, we need to welcome people in. This isn't the time for us to shut the door when people are in need. Many of these refugees are trying to escape that same terrorism that we saw in Paris. So they are feeling it day in and day out when they were in Syria, or when they were in Iraq, or when they were in Afghanistan. So I think it is something that we as a culture have to be brave enough to understand that we have procedures for vetting, and we can't walk frightened. I think if we do, then the terrorists and ISIS have won. We need to maintain our values and our spirit of reaching out and helping people.
Sean, a very small percentage of the Syrian refugees coming into the U.S. are Christian. Is that concerning to you? Where are those persecuted Christians?
Well, it doesn't concern me per se that a small number are Christian that are coming here. Many of the Christians that we see have not taken the traditional routes that many of the other refugees have, going into refugee camps. They've assimilated into some of the local communities. They've stayed with families and friends of people in the neighboring countries, and they're looking for that same advantage coming into the United States or into the European countries. So they are trying to make those connections instead of going through the formal routes.
I see. Sean, thank you so much for your perspective.
Up next, artwork that pictures the presentation of Mary on the beauty of faith. And the Holy Door at St. Peter's Basilica is unveiled for all to see. The Beauty of Faith, the title of Dr. Jem Sullivan's book in our special segment here on EWTN News Nightly. Jem is a former tour guide at the National Gallery of Art, so we have the Feast of the Presentation of Mary coming up in this 14th or 18th century piece. We see that depicted.
What we know about the presentation of the Virgin Mary in the temple comes mostly from sources outside the Gospels in apocryphal writings. And the artist Antonio Cavallucci would probably have looked at these writings for inspiration as he is completing this beautiful ethereal sketch. Mary is standing at the entrance of the temple with St. Joachim and St. Anne. Notice the 3 steps leading up to the temple. This is perhaps a reference to the fact that the tradition said that she was presented in the temple at the age of 3, or perhaps it was symbolic of the Trinity. Mary's entire life was lived in the power of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So St. Joachim and Anne are presenting Mary according to the Jewish custom, but she is different. She is the one, Mary is the one set apart, chosen by God to be the Theotokos, the bearer of God's Son into the world.
And a 14th century work depicts the same experience, the same event, but it looks very different.
That's right. This 14th century masterpiece from the National Gallery of Art reminds us that Mary's entire life, from her Immaculate Conception to her presentation in the temple to the Annunciation, was a preparation for the indwelling of God in the world. So even as Mary is presented in the temple, she's preparing to become the temple of the Lord. We are reminded that it was in the family that Mary is nurtured for her role as the mother of the Redeemer. So again, Mary is standing at the temple with her family, St. Joachim and Anne, and in a very childlike, simple way, she turns to look back at St. Anne. And of course, she's again being prepared for her role as the mother of the Redeemer.
Dr. Jem Sullivan, the book is The Beauty of Faith, using Christian art to spread the good news. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, the Holy Door at St. Peter's Basilica, hidden since the Holy Year of 2000 by a brick wall, is now unveiled. During a ceremony Tuesday evening, following a procession, workers began to carefully remove the brick. They extracted a small metal box containing mementos from the Jubilee year 2000. Included are the keys Pope Francis will use to open the Holy Door on December 8th, beginning the Jubilee Year of Mercy. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night. God bless you.